It's time for the chip race.
For strategy this week, we welcome back to the show a poker player and coach who just finished second in the 25k Highroller at WPT. He is our friend Kevin Rabichow. Kevin, welcome back.
Thanks, Dave. How are you doing?
Great to have you back, Kev. Firstly, great results. I watched a lot of this final table and I thought you played really well. How did you feel it went?
Thanks. Yeah, I was feeling really fortunate for finishing as deep as I did. Like I started day two with nothing impressive and hit like quite a heater around the time of the money bubble. And from there had like, I don't know, not totally smooth sailing, obviously, because I didn't win the tournament, but I felt that I played really well. There were stretches in the middle of the final table where I felt like I didn't play super well, but I think a lot of that was just the atmosphere of like watching back the hands that you've been playing on the big screen during breaks. Like that's always kind of strange as an experience of tournament play to immediately get feedback that says like, oh yeah, you made the wrong fold there. Like, oh yeah, nice work on that bluff or whatever.
Yeah, you're kind of getting your pants pulled down in front of everybody.
Yeah, it was especially awkward because like it was day 1A of the main event. So the 25K is playing on screen for like, I don't know, 1,000+ people or however many people were there in the room. So yeah, every decision I made felt like it had a lot of attention.
Indeed. Well, look, to the hand, it is from 9-handed play right at the start of that final table. And the villain is the fearless, it must be said, Justin Saliba. The blinds are 50k, 75k with a 75k ante. I want to quickly run through the payouts because obviously with 9 left, the ICM is peaking. 9th gets 81k, 8th gets 93k, 7th gets 110k, 6th gets 134k, 5th gets 169k, 4th gets 226k, 3rd gets 328k, 2nd gets 519k, and 1st gets 894k. You open under the gun +1 to 150k off a stack of 4.35 million, 59 big blinds. You have pocket fives, 5 of clubs, 5 of spades. The action folds around to Saliba on the button, who has 2.285 million, 30 big blinds. He is mid-pack. You are obviously doing very well at this point. He 3-bets to 375k and you call. Fives out of position is a difficult hand with which to realize, but he has laid you a very compelling price here. Plus, he's the one in a tough ICM spot-wise down the streets, perhaps. How much of a factor do you think the latter point is with a hand like this? It feels rough, but I guess there are some textures you could potentially attack.
Yeah, I mean, this ICM dynamic was front of mind as we got set up at the final table for sure. I remember thinking the payouts that you just described were unusually flat from 9th to 5th or so, which in my mind, and at the risk of making an ICM conceptual mistake in front of someone who's written a book on it, the idea that I had from that was that I was more incentivized, especially with a slight chip lead coming into the final table, to play for first at this point, whereas I felt that maybe that would shift as we got closer to 6-handed or 7-handed. So it felt, certainly not like a cash game environment by any stretch of the imagination, but it felt like a scenario where the payout incentives are still somewhat top heavy and I should be treating them as such. So that makes me inclined basically just to open a little bit more of a distributed range of hands, pocket fives being one of those hands that I might just open fold if the ICM scenario was a little different. But being the chip leader and then also feeling like we had that top heavy incentive situation, I felt like I could open a few more of these speculative hands. And certainly once I face a 3-bet, these are not really the hands that I plan to fold. Those would be more like high Broadway cards that tend to be dominated, or even like suited hands or pairs that are not drawing as live, like middle cards.
Yeah, turning to you, Dara, obviously Kevin's sort of talked about the ICM implications of this one. It's sort of a top stack versus middle stack in the pack environment here. Can you clarify some of the points there? The structure, as Kevin described, is absolutely right. It's sort of a bit flat right now, which does mean some ICM implications. But then when you have the very sharp peak up top, that does sort of imply that if you're one of the top stacks and more likely to end up in one of those later positions, you could potentially sort of go for it a bit more.
Yeah, I guess the general misconception or misconceptualization most people make about ICM is they focus too much on the immediate pay jump, and they intuitively think if the immediate pay jump is quite large, then that increases the ICM. And if the structure is flat, that reduces the ICM, where the reverse is true. If the flatter the structure overall from first down to ninth, the higher the ICM would be. And the more top heavy it is, in other words, the greater the pay jumps actually from each position, the less the ICM factor would be. This is a kind of a mix where it's quite flat up to fifth, but then it gets very top heavy. The fact that it's top heavy is a bigger consideration, as Kevin accurately assessed. So given this is quite top heavy structure, Kevin's absolutely right. We should be opening pretty wide distributed range here. I had no idea what the ranges here should be, so I put it into HRC beta and went off that, and that confirmed that fives is absolutely an open, and fives is not 100% call, but it does call some of the time against the 3-bet.
That's interesting. I'm glad someone did the responsible thing and ran the simulation on that, because to be honest, I haven't done it myself. But my intuition for, let's say, reacting to the 3-bet and playing as chip leader, I've played a fair bit. I would say the majority of the final table experience I have with deeper stacks is online, because the ACR structures tend to get you to the final table with quite a lot of chips. So the simulations that I have run that probably informed my understanding of this spot, like maybe we were a bit deeper average stack, maybe the amount that I was putting at risk by calling a 3-bet out of position was not such a high percentage of my overall stack, like that might be playing in. And that, because you just described my stack, I guess it was not even 50 big blinds. I could totally see that being kind of a close spot where I'm putting in effectively 10% of my stack to see the flop.
Yeah, well, let's get to the flop. The pot is 950k, and it comes the 4 of hearts, 3 of diamonds, 2 of hearts. You check. Saliba bets 200k, 21%, and you call. Darryl, I'll start with you this time. Without making a set, this feels like one of the best boards we could possibly see. Kevin elects to flat. But as pointed out by Henry Kilban on commentary, this flop presents the unlikely situation where you could perhaps raise to deny equity from overcards. My immediate response to Henry saying that, though, was most of the hands that are like that contain an ace, and we actually love if an ace comes. Therefore, I much prefer the flat as Kevin did. Does the solver bear that out?
Yeah, the solver just pure calls here in this spot, which I think it kind of makes sense because he has a lot of better hands than our fives right now, all the bigger pairs. And we don't really want to narrow the range down to just that by doing the raise. So if we're behind, it kind of incentivizes not to put all the chips in right now. Conversely, if we're ahead, yeah, I mean, okay, all his ace highs and king highs have a reasonable equity against us, but the ace highs can get coolered, obviously. So that's a bit of a factor. So yeah, the solver doesn't do much check raising at all in this spot. It check calls most of its range. The stuff that it does choose to check raise are stronger over pairs like queens plus, and then a lot of ace X is a bluff.
Well, turning back to you, Kev, a feature of this hand has been the small sizings, and spoiler alert, that trend does continue. Do you think Justin has chosen a good size here? And if so, can you explain why?
In game, I was a bit surprised by the choice because I think given the board texture, it's also in the back of my mind that I should be leading this flop sometimes. I think that's worth mentioning because it also plays into how Justin's c-bet strategy might look. I suspect that he did not anticipate any leads from me, but I also definitely considered it. And I think if the stack distribution was more in my favor, I probably would have led, just like expecting more passive play on his part. And also recognizing this is a relatively good board texture for the out of position caller. But I mean, this exact scenario might not fit that description. Either way, in game, I read his bet size as like offering me too good of a price. And it's generally not a situation where he wants me to stick around if I have marginal equity. I think like, if he has pocket jacks and he's betting this size, he's not exactly thrilled if it encourages me to float, all of my ace highs where he might get me to fold some of them with a larger bet. He might not love that I'm floating like king queen suited with a backdoor flush draw kind of hand strength. That was kind of my instinct, was that he's probably offering my range a bit too good of a price. And he does have, I would imagine, enough bluffs with the way preflop ranges are going to be constructed, like enough polarity in his preflop range that he'll find bluffs for a larger size. So if I was playing his spot, I think I would have intuitively bet like half pot and done some checking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me as well. Dara, is that borne out in the solver?
Yeah, it is very much so. This is an unusual size. I gave the solver full array of sizes, and the size that it used predominantly was half pot. As Kevin said, this doesn't make a lot of sense with too much of the range. Just to go back to the other point too about leading, I did give Kevin the option to lead here, and while it didn't lead much of its range, it checked 90%. This specific hand was actually a hand that it did lead quite a lot. So if we do have leads, this is definitely a hand that belongs in that range.
Perhaps exploitatively, I wish I had just led, like gone on that instinct, because I was thinking if there's anything he's going to check a lot, it's going to be ace high. And as you mentioned, with the way that my hand interplays with ace high, I'd really like to build the pot against ace high specifically. So like checking and letting him save money with that hand class is not great for me.
Well, to the turn, the pot is now 1.35 million and it comes the 7 of hearts. The SPR is 1.25 to 1. Again, you check. Saliba bets 450k now, and again, you call. Kevin, when a third heart comes out here on the turn, a lot of players at lower stakes, I know, take the view that this is terrible because if your opponent is bluffing, then he probably has a heart and we could be dead to 2 hearts. They use that as a justification to fold. The thing is, though, if he has a 1 heart hand, he will be emboldened to bluff this card. And of course, from an overall range standpoint, we need him to have as many bluffs as possible to make our call more profitable. Can you elaborate on that point and how it informs your strategy as you look ahead to potential rivers?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you as far as like how the average player miscalculates this situation because of that concern. Like the turn is a very good point in the hand to plan for how I expect to respond on various river cards. And I agree that a lot of his bluffing range will choose a heart, but that's more a guiding decision to help me navigate rivers than it is a reason to fold the turn. Like the reason to fold the turn versus calling the turn, or I guess doing other things. I suppose I have options. It's mostly about that ratio of the proper number of bluffs compared to the proper number of value bets. And yeah, if they bluff with too much equity and they don't bluff frequently enough, then that's a good reason for me to just fold unless I'm getting too good of a price with my hand. That would come into play, I think, if I was holding something different. Like if I was holding like, I don't know, pocket 9s with no heart or something, like some hand that's quite hopeless when it's behind, then yeah, against a range construction that uses too much equity and maybe doesn't bluff enough, I could probably just fold the turn here. But I think Justin's range is going to have sufficient bluffs. I also think he might bluff without a heart sometimes. And certainly pocket 5s, like I have backup equity if I'm just up against kings here or whatever. So all of that considered, I'm using that to help me plan how to navigate rivers. How I navigate on hearts compared to non-hearts is a quite obvious way to think about that, but also thinking about like which specific combos pre-flop would contain a heart, and therefore which river cards are going to allow him to have sufficient bluffs, like on the non-hearts. That's another way that I could use that to my advantage, recognizing like the heart makes up a lot of the bluffs, combine that with the pre-flop range, and I can figure out which cards are blank for his range and which cards are good for his range beyond just the obvious heart versus non-heart.
That's a fantastic breakdown. So to the river, the pot is 2.25 million. The SPR is 0.55 to 1. And it comes the 4 of diamonds. For a third time, you check, and unloading the clip, Saliba bets 1.2 million, leaving 60k behind. We can't read anything into that because on a final table with immediate ladders, that is the correct thing to do. If he's bluffing, he wants to give himself the chance to ladder / spin up. So he must balance that by doing the same when he's actually got it. You tank for a short while before ultimately calling. He shows the ace of clubs, jack of hearts, and you pull farther away from the chasing pack. Dara, is this call solver approved? And what are the kinds of hands that Kevin can profitably call with on the river in solver land?
Yeah, this is solver approved. The solver pure calls with this hand. Interestingly, it calls this hand but folds 6s, which is obviously blocker effects. And then it calls stronger over pairs as well. The call only makes about $300, which is obviously not very much given the size of the prize pool. So it's a really close spot. It's difficult, but this is on the right side. 6s is kind of break even. 5s is slightly profitable.
Well, Kevin, we see there that you have made a solver-proof play. And of course, then if Justin is more inclined to bluff more often than the average player, it obviously makes it even more of a call. I want to come to you for the final word, though. Justin has blasted off here, I suppose, taking the line. He absolutely would have with an overpair or a flush. You've got to give him credit for the moxie. But did he choose a good river bluff candidate here, in your opinion?
Yeah, actually, the hand that he turned over was like one of 2 exact hands that I felt pretty confident should be bluffing this situation. So I think my in-game thought process relied somewhat heavily on making sure that like the bluffs that I thought he was supposed to take were just relatively easy to arrive here with, which would be ace jack and ace queen without the ace of hearts. Like with the other heart, I thought in particular would be a really excellent bluff candidate. And I also thought that he would identify that. So the clear combinations that I was expecting him to follow through on, which I kind of thought would just make it enough situationally to make it a decent call, would be ace jack with the jack of hearts, ace queen with the queen of hearts. Notably because I can have ace queen or possibly ace king, although in hindsight, I'm probably just all in at this stack size with ace king pre-flop. I can have ace of hearts queen myself. So getting me to fold that hand on the river is certainly a good thing when he has the lower heart. So I thought those would be hands that would for sure bluff. And then I also thought it was possible that if he had ace of hearts or just no heart whatsoever, like if he had some hand that had no heart whatsoever, he would always bluff the river. I wasn't sure what he would do with like ace of hearts jack, for example. He probably feels the need to bluff it at least sometimes, I would think.
Yeah, I did say I want to give you the last word, but actually just turning back to Dara just for one moment. Dara, this ace jack, ace queen with the other card being a heart combo is obviously a class of hands that Kevin had predicted and accurately predicted would be in Justin's range. And obviously we know that the fives is a call, but the sixes wouldn't always be the call. So it's clearly knife edge stuff. Justin's line is very convincing. When you go kind of small and get your stack in that way, it does feel like you've gone for the milking line. And in the end, he's trying to get Kevin to fold when he probably needs about 25% to call. So he's not really getting rid of much of his range there on the river, but it does tell that very convincing story in a way. And obviously by taking this pathway, I'm going to guess that, it is solver approved or it's very close to being.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. The interesting thing for me about the hand is the sort of different way somebody like Kevin looks at this hand from the way a more typical player would. I think a typical player would fall back on gut intuition that when it goes small, it's in inverted commas, never a bluff. But, when you're playing somebody like Justin Saliba, he's going to be bluffing in every line and probably close to the correct frequency. So you kind of have to break it down then and try to identify what the bluffs are and therefore what the best bluff catches are. I think if he had turned over the winning hand here, Justin, I'm pretty sure all the YouTube comments would have been, what a donkey call. He's beating nothing on the river. He's never for bluffing using this line.
Absolutely.
Well, look, it has been amazing to get you on the show to discuss some strategy. You are one of the best strategic minds in the game. So we really appreciate you bringing your insights. Kevin Rabichow, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.